Hey, what's up, everyone? Seja here.
Hey, I'm Whitney, and we're just here in our garden, and the Motherwort is flowering, so we're going to share a little bit about this plant.
All right, so let's talk about some of the core properties of Motherwort. So first off, its common name is Motherwort. Latin name is Leonuris cardiaca, which we'll talk about some of the interesting dynamics around that name. But it's in the mint family, Lamiaceae, as indicated by the square stems and the opposite leaves. And one of the ways that I like to start off talking about a plant is really describing the taste of the herb. Taste is incredibly indicative of the core medicinal properties of a remedy. And with Motherwort, this is a straight bitter plant. It is a really bitter plant. And the bitter taste indicates a lot of things about a plant, as a lot of people these days have come to understand, is that it is really indicative of an action on the digestive system. The bitter receptors on the tongue directly correlate to a nerve response into the digestive system that causes everything to start secreting. But a lot of research has been done on bitter receptors showing that they're not just located in the digestive system. We've got bitter receptors scattered throughout our entire cardiovascular system, our nervous system, all throughout the body. And this is why we see so many bitter plants having a really wide variety of properties outside of the sphere of just digestion. So the bitter flavor here, that indicates a number of the affinities and actions that this plant has. The core affinities in terms of the organs and systems and tissues that Motherwort has an affinity for, first off, certainly the digestive system. Second off, it does have a minor influence on the liver. But third, and most importantly, in my opinion, is its action on the cardiovascular system, specifically on the heart, on the vasculature itself, and lastly, on the nervous system. And these last two affinities are really where we see some of the unique properties come through with Motherwort. And in terms of its actions, right, we think of it as a nervine. This is one of the main ways that we think of a lot of the bitter mint plants actually have a strong action on the nervous system. Other herbs like skullcap, for example, is a great bitter nervine in the mint family. Bugleweed, another great bitter mint family plant with an action on the nervous system. But what's really unique about Motherwort is it's in this category that I like to describe as cardiac nervines. You know, different nervous system plants tend to have affinities for specific aspects of the nervous system. Some tend to be much more active in the brain. Some are much more active on the heart. Some are much more active in the gut. And these are really the three kind of main conglomerations of neural tissue in the body. I describe it in my book as these are also the three seats of consciousness, right? We have our gut level instincts, we have our heart as an organ of perception, and we have the brain or the mind or the intellect. So, you know, instinct, intuition, and intellect. And Motherwort is really unique here in the way that it is very specific for the nervous system and its relationship to the heart. So this is a great cardiac nervine. What does that mean? Well, it's really great for people that when they get nervous, when they get anxious, when they get stressed out, and they specifically feel it in their heart. That can be things like palpitations, a nervous heart, or rapid beating heart. They get really sweaty when they get nervous. This is where Motherwort is really, really powerful and potent. So as a cardiac nervine, this is one of my favorite remedies. This is one of the primary ways that I have used it in my practice for people. So we've got the cardiac nervine is really unique here. One of the other affinities that this plant has that I didn't mention is also for the female anatomical reproductive system. So this is specific for the uterus, and that translates into its action as an emmenagogue. And it is a really, really effective emmenagogue. I think it's one of the most effective emmenagogues. We've seen it work in drop doses, like really, really quickly as an effective emmenagogue. So those are some of the main actions: bitter tonic, emmenagogue, nervine, and specifically cardiac nervine. And then lastly, we have the energetics. And, the energetics of herbs is a very important attribute of their properties. This is the way herbs have been traditionally understood throughout the world and many different systems of herbal medicine. Before we understood anything about constituents or biochemical mechanisms of action. And it is one thing that I find really important to reincorporate into our modern model of herbal medicine alongside the chemistry and the biochemistry and the vitalist actions and properties and things like that. So with Motherwort as a very strong bitter herb, this is definitely a cooling plant. A lot of plants that have a very specific bitter property, meaning they don't have other tastes incorporated into it, like they're not volatile bitters, they're just a true bitter. Typically, that's a very cooling action. It sedates heat. Bitter has kind of this downward bearing energy. So it brings the vital force down when it's radiating too much up and out. And this is very much true with kind of an agitated heart. When the heart is stressed, and it is when you feel stressed and anxious, the energy is kind of moving up and out to the periphery. And when people are hot, the energy moves up and out. You get red flushed face, you get headaches. Even when you're really hot, you're sweating, right? The cooling property brings that down and in. So it's sedative to excess heat, specifically in the heart, as well as specifically in the nervous system. Because this bitter property tends to have that downward bearing action, that also tends to drain fluids. So in that way, Motherwort is considered drying. So this is a cold, drying plant energetically. And then I also so that's thinking of it in terms of temperature and moisture. There's a third energetic quality that I think is very important to look at, and that is the polarity of tonic and relaxant. This is looking at the tone of the tissue. Is it tightening and astringing and kind of cinching things up in the tissues, tonifying, or is it relaxant to the tone of the tissue? And certainly as a nervine, Motherwort is definitely on the relaxant side. So that's kind of the energetic profile of Motherwort: cooling, drying, relaxant. That property is happening in the cardiovascular system. That property is happening in the nervous system. That property is happening in the digestive system, as well as the female reproductive system. And that all really ties back into its taste as being a bitter tonic. So these are some of the basic properties of Motherwort. And to me, this is the foundation of how you come to understand a plant. Before you get into learning about what a plant's good for, it's important to have that knowledge based on these core properties: its taste, its actions, its affinities, and its energetics. And so these are some of the ways that we've come to understand Motherwort, and ultimately translates into its clinical indications and how we would want to use it therapeutically.
All right. So Sage just shared some awesome, big picture stuff about this plant and its whole medicinal profile. And then I'm just going to share a little bit of storytelling. So you kind of paints the picture of how my personal experience and how this herb could actually, what it might look like for somebody as far as who the type of person it could help. This plant is very dear to me because it was actually the plant that kind of made me an herbalist on my plant path. And it was at a time in my life where I felt really weak. I'd gone through a bunch of traumatic experiences and just had kind of gotten to this point where I was just worn down and in pain emotionally. So I was in an herbal apprenticeship, and I happened to see this plant in my herb teacher's garden. And I was like, what is that plant? It just spoke to me. And like Sage says this quite a bit, how a plant will stand up in the forest and call your name, and how it really just will speak to you in a certain way. And at the time, I also had amenorrhea. So that means I'd stopped my menses and I think it was maybe at least 6 months I hadn't had a period. So I was trying all sorts of stuff. It was just, I just really wanted to get back in balance again, and wanted to feel that balance of and feel good again. So this plant, I started taking it. I harvested some of it and made my own tincture of it and started taking it. And really quickly, my cycles just came back and I started to have, regular cycles again, which was huge. But then I also had this feeling that came over me when I was around this plant. And that was part of what that initial impression of the presence of this plant was, just this real, this calm, and yet also this strength at the same time. And so there's something about this plant that is just incredible in the way that it calms the heart, the way Seijo is describing, and just having this gentle kind of relaxing quality. It's not something like valerian that's going to make you super sleepy and knock you out, but it just has that, you can take a deep breath and feel centered and grounded. And like Seijo was talking about, that downward action, I feel like bitters are grounding in that way, just kind of bringing everything down. It's also that downward movement, as he was just talking about, bringing fluids down. That's the part of that menagogue action, getting that bleeding to start again, is just moving everything downward. So this plant, to me, really represents, there's these beautiful little tiny fuzzy flowers, you'll see. But the seed pods are actually super sharp and pokey and thorny. And you see that in other kind of heart remedies. You see that in rose, for example, these soft, beautiful flowers, this beautiful pink, purplish color. And then there's this sharp thorn around the edges, around the outside of it, protecting it. And so, to me, that's also something teaching about, there's the healing aspect of the pain, the sharpness, those thorny, sharp places of maybe the pains we've experienced in our life, and helping to bring softness, soothing, and calming to allow the healing to happen in the heart in that way. But then there's also that kind of protective quality around the heart, and those that sharpness that just kind of helps to also establish those clear boundaries for your emotional heart or emotional well-being. So for me, what this plant really taught me was just that inner strength and resilience, and that kind of courageous quality, as far as that lion-hearted, he said he'll probably share a little bit more about the Leonaris cardiaca, the lion-hearted one, which is the Latin name means, and brought back that feeling, that blood moving in my body, that strength, and also the calming. I had anxiety for a long time and started to feel that calming in my heart. One of the signatures of that would also be a red tip tongue, which I also had kind of a constitutional thing, and that tended to be that heart fire where, like Seijo was describing, your thoughts are kind of spinning out of control as far as that heat is going up into your mind, spinning out, and you can have that anxiousness and nervousness and just kind of excess of that fire moving upward. So that helped to calm my heart and helped me to feel centered and strong again. And once I experienced that healing that I went through, it was like I found my purpose and found my path. It was like working with a plant like that and having it actually change something inside of me and help to move me from this weakened, traumatized place, and to come into this place of, through just working with this one plant, the way that I felt my heart become stronger, the way that I felt myself become calmer and more centered in the world, and then finding my place as far as my path on in my life. This plant, it was just so clear. I felt it speak to me. I was like, this is what I want to do for other people. I want to help other people with this and just help to connect people with plants.
All right. So one of the ways that I like to think about medicinal plants is through the lens of the alchemical tradition. And one of the ways that alchemy looks at plants is seeing their correlations to the archetypal forces of nature. And this oftentimes translates to understanding how a plant correlates to one of the planets or to the elements. And when we're looking at Motherwort, To me, this is a very distinctly Venusian plant. We see this Venusian property in the way that it is having a very strong affinity for the female anatomical reproductive system, the way in which it is operating on the menstrual cycle, as well as its relaxant nature. The whole dynamic of Venus is a relaxant quality, right? This archetype is at home within itself, right? Venus is relaxed and calm and peaceful and just enjoying the beauty of life and enjoying the beauty of nature. And so that translates to a physical property too. So very commonly, plants that have an action on the nervous system, have a calming action on the nervous system, many times are actually ruled by Venus. Sometimes they're ruled by Mercury, which is the main planetary ruler of the nervous system, but many Venusian plants are as well. And so these are some of the ways that I think of the Venusian property of this plant. And then as the name indicates, right, Leonurus cardiaca, the lion-hearted. And of course, that kind of points us towards a correlation to the astrological sign of Leo, right? Which is the main astrological sign that governs the heart. So Leo rules in medical astrology the heart and the cardiovascular system and all of that. And so if we think of that combination, right, Venus in Leo, that is relaxing Venus, the heart, Leo. And Leo's a fixed fire sign. And one of the ways that I like to think of that is, that fire element, we can kind of see it in the signature of the plant, where you see it's probably a little bit hard to see here because the camera's not focused on it. But right here on the flower edges, that's very prickly and pokey. It gets when it gets much further on, it gets really, really sharp. And then you kind of have the intensity of the leaves. The leaves to me actually kind of look like a flame, when they're a fire kind of pointing upwards like that. The traditional glyph for the fire element in alchemy is this upward pointing triangle. So that fire element working through the blood, right? As we've seen, this remedy is definitely working through the blood. And then that fixed property, fixed is like solidity, stability, consistency. And this is what this plant is doing within the heart. It's like if you think of a heart palpitation, when your heart's beating rapidly and out of control, that's like there's no rhythm to it. There's no solidity. There's no consistency. It's like too much air, too much wind in the heart. And Motherwort anchors that. It fixes that heartbeat down so that it is stable and consistent and solid. And it's also doing that in regards to the reproductive system, right? In the way that it is stabilizing and fixing that menstrual cycle, creating a rhythm to it. And, we really see that in the signature of the plant, where if you look at these the way the flower stalks or the way the flower heads move, there is this very consistent rhythm about it, right? The way they kind of slowly get more and more and more, but there's a very distinct rhythm to this plant. When you look at it kind of from a distance, it's hard to explain, but it's just, there's something about it where there's a consistency in the rhythm and how its morphology is. And that is considered a signature for that rhythm of the heart, that rhythm of the menses. So this is just a little bit about Motherwort here. It's growing in the garden. We're getting ready to harvest it today. It's Venus Day. It's early in the morning. We're getting ready to harvest our Motherwort, make it into a tincture. We generally do this plant at about 60% alcohol. That extracts the bitter compounds really nicely. We do that fresh. If we're doing it dried, we probably do it a little bit lower, maybe 40% alcohol. And it's good at a 1-to-5 strength ratio, 1 gram of herb to 5 mils of menstruum. We find that's perfectly effective strength ratio for this plant. Of course, you can make it stronger if you want, but even 3 drops in that 1-to-5 is a really, really effective remedy. And this plant, last note, this plant really does not really make the most ideal tea. And the reason for that is it's super bitter. I remember I had a student one time that was talking about working with a client that had a lot of, nervous issues, nervousness and anxiety and things like that. And she was like, yeah, I gave it to this client and I don't know, she didn't take it, she didn't want to take her herbs. And we were like, well, what was the formula? And she's like, well, it was Motherwort and it was skullcap and it was valerian. And I was like, okay, well, that's like pretty calming. And well, how much were you having her take? And she said, oh, I was having her drink a quart of tea a day. And I was like, whoa, you gave that in a tea? Like, ugh, like, have you ever tasted Motherwort in a tea, even by itself? And she was like, no. And so we, gave her some. It was like, whoa, like, it's really hard to take. And she was an herbalist, so this remedy is really best as a tincture simply by virtue of how bitter it is and just making sure your compliance is going to be good with it. So thanks so much for joining me in this video. Hit the like and subscribe button. If you're not following us on our email list, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. We've got tons of free resources available to you there. And thanks for joining me here in this little snippet on Motherwort. Until the next one, take care and be well.